Good morning. My name is Benny, and I use he, him pronouns. Today, I'm going to talk about meditation, but I would like to begin with silence. Please join me as you are able. Thank you for joining me in silence. That was about 3 minutes. But if we were in a Quaker service, it would typically last for about an hour. There are other elements such as readings or hymns that take place. Yes, please cough and adjust and settle in. It's good now. But the Quakers emphasize silence as their main mode of worship. I've never actually been to a Quaker service. I would like to go. I've never been on a meditation retreat, never used a mindfulness app, never talked to a monk, nun, or guru. I generally struggle to maintain habitual practices of contemplation, even exercise or diet. I do brush my teeth twice a day and floss occasionally, though I don't think I brush long enough and generally don't like dwelling on the health of my teeth. Sure, I've read some books about meditation, but I don't think that really counts. I'm not an expert on the topic of meditation, let alone the experience. On top of that, I'm not really interested in trying to convince anybody that they should meditate, even if I think it's a good practice. But at the very least today, I want us to reconsider how we think about meditation. I'd like to examine some of our cultural perceptions about it. I'm going to share some personal reflections on how I've reconsidered meditation. And last, I want to reconsider why anyone would meditate after all. Let's start out in Exodus. I want to start out in the origin myth of the Israelites, more commonly known as the Old Testament. In that story, the Israelites have escaped bondage in Egypt and are struggling in the desert. During that time, Moses, the leader of the refugees, receives instruction and laws for the people during a dramatic interaction with God. This is the part where the 10 Commandments are given to Moses on Mount Sinai while the people are down below. There's thunder, lightning, smoke, loud trumpet sounds. And in chapter 20, verse 19, the Israelites say to Moses, "Do not have God speak to us, or we will die." Do not have God speak to us, or we will die. More on this later. It's impossible to think about meditation without conjuring cultural contrasts between what is commonly referred to as Eastern and Western. And often, Western is interchangeable with Christian. Unfortunately for many of us today, something like Mr. Miyagi is the first thing that comes to mind when we think about something like meditation. There's deep historical work showing how imperial societies have produced fictional, romanticized representations of Arabic culture, extending also to cultures beyond. Edward Said's landmark work, Orientalism, published in 1978, is a key text here. There's some decolonizing work to do as we approach the practice of meditation, and we don't have to look very hard to find these deep biases embedded in Christian literature. In fact, this sermon series borrows its structure from a book by Richard J. Foster, and in the chapter on meditation, it says, Eastern meditation is an attempt to empty the mind, and Christian meditation is an attempt to fill the mind. The two ideas are quite different. In my opinion, the distinction Foster is trying to make feels passive, dismissive, and grossly oversimplified. In addition to decolonizing, I think we might re-examine how capitalism shapes our notions of meditation. I think the temptation here is to think of meditation in productive terms or achievement, another box to check off. There are no shortage of meditation apps and expensive retreats. In this regard, for me, Thomas Merton's words resonate. He says, "We have what we seek. It is there all the time. And if we give it time, it will make itself known to us." A critical view of capitalism is that it profits off of our disconnection, including disconnection from ourselves. And I think meditation is about connection to ourselves. A key text for me recently has been Debt, the First 5,000 Years, which is an anthropological history of money by David Graeber. That book unexpectedly digs into the realm of soul and body. Graeber is basically connecting the invention of coinage with the rise of philosophy that distinguished the mind and body as distinct, whereas our ancestors actually never thought of the soul and body as different things. In the book, Graeber describes an interaction between a Catholic missionary and a local sculptor in New Caledonia. That's a remote group of Pacific Islands. In 1920, Maurice, who's the missionary, had spent years teaching the gospel there and wanted to assess his students' progress. There's a lot more going on than just the gospel teaching. But he asked, in short, we introduced the notion of spirit to your way of thinking, right? And his student, Bessu, objected. Spirit? Bah! You didn't bring us the spirit. We already knew the spirit existed. We have always acted in accord with the spirit. What you've brought us is the body. I'm quoting Graeber here. He says, the notion that humans had souls appeared to Bossu to be self-evident. The notion that there was such a thing as a body apart from the soul, a mere material collection of nerves and tissues, let alone that the body is the prison of the soul, that the mortification of the body could be a means to glorification or liberation of the soul. All this, turns out, struck him as utterly new and exotic. All kinds of things, all kinds of changes happen when we start thinking of our body and mind as separate things. And it's difficult to have perspective on something so pervasive in our culture, like capitalism, But again, Merton's words resonate with a deep part of me and put me at ease. We have what we seek. So, decolonize, decapitalize, and ironically, I think we could stand to demystify meditation a little bit. I think we've been made to feel that it's very difficult, elusive, or esoteric, like the image of a monk on a mountaintop, or even Moses on Mount Sinai. A Buddhist monk, Shunryu Suzuki, wrote, "When you practice zazen, just practice zazen. If enlightenment comes, it just comes." I think meditation is actually a lot more accessible than we've been made to think. One of my favorite little books, Practicing the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence, is about a Catholic friar who set out to pray without ceasing, constantly. Most of the book, though, is about how he would get distracted or feel like he was failing at his goal, but ultimately how he found peace within and through the distractions and the diversions. He said, "Neither skill nor knowledge is needed to go to God." I read a great overview of meditative thought and practices called Journey of Awakening, a meditator's guidebook by Ram Dass. It was written in the late 70s when Eastern wisdom practices were becoming popular in America. But just skimming the table of contents was actually a little reassuring. Seeing chapter titles like Many Paths and Let It Change and Make It Simple, To Everything There Is a Season, and whole sections of chapters that like Losing Your Way, Getting Stuck, and Getting Free. While I was reading, I found myself reconsidering the breadth of meditative experience in my life. There was no single way to do it, and it was ever changing. I gave a sermon on prayer 2 years ago, and part of it was about opening up what we considered as prayer. That we were participating in prayer much more actively than we probably considered, and that each of us has an intimate language of prayer completely unique to us. I think I'm just saying a similar thing about meditation. And in that spirit, I want to share a few meditative memories that came up for me as I reconsidered what meditation is. And as you listen, maybe you might reconsider some of your memories and experiences. I was on the swim team in high school. When you're swimming, your ears are at the water's edge, rotating in and out of muted submersion. Your eyes rove back and forth upon a thick line between one edge of the pool to the other. Your arms soar ahead and settle gently on the water's surface, catching, pulling the slippery liquid behind you over and over and over again, holding your breath for regular intervals, alternating, balancing, stretching, all the technique you've carefully built, subsumed into speeding forward towards the wall, tucking, whipping upside down around to plant your feet and transfer your momentum into the spring of your leg, catapulting the spear streamlined form of your body, slicing back through your own wake, wiggling through the water like a dolphin. My longest practice session, this is ridiculous, was 20,000 yards or 800 lengths of the pool. All that to say, swimming is a flow state, no pun intended. Anthology Film Archives is my favorite movie theater in the city. One day I went to see an experimental film shot on celluloid that was completely comprised of like the noise and texture of celluloid. It was kind of like the white snow you'd see on old television tube sets, except like a film version of that. And it was 45 minutes long. Mind you, I know that I'm often getting into a durational experience. No plot, no characters, no music, no dialogue, no image, just texture, basically, for a duration of time that you probably wouldn't say felt like a short film. I sat in the theater with about 6 other people, letting the projected light bounce into my eyes, softly caressing the image-forming parts of my brain. I went through several stages internally: fascination, examination, contemplation, patience, re-examination, questioning, wondering, accepting, dismissing, enjoying, relaxing, and finally, boredom and drowsiness. I lost track of time, often getting distracted by the red glowing exit sign. Impatience and frustration were ready to pounce, but I felt stubborn enough to endure. Eventually, I sort of let go of a lot of what I was feeling and thinking. I was just looking. And then slowly but suddenly, I started to see things. There's no alcohol or mind-altering supplements in my system. And I also started to comprehend and think new things as I continued looking. I was re-energized, wrapped with attention and excitement about seeing itself, and how my brain started to conjure images out of nothing, like looking at clouds and ascribing shapes and stories to them, much the same as ancient generations prior had seen meaning in the visual noise of the night sky, projecting their understanding on arbitrary points of light hanging above them. And then I felt awe at how such a simple gesture could trigger such a profound feeling in my mind and body. Meditative indeed. The first time I ever went surfing was on a really bad day at the Rockaways. The waves were intense and my expectations were really low, but I was with seasoned friends who I trusted. We were all taken by surprise as we found ourselves rapidly pulled down the beach towards the rock jetty. My friends were able to just avoid the approaching danger, but I quickly found that my efforts to get away were in vain. I'm a good swimmer and lifeguarded many years, but I knew that I was facing easy death in that moment. Unbidden, the word help half-heartedly emerged from my mouth to the audience of myself and the ocean, knowing that my friends were not in sight and rescue services weren't present that early. I steeled myself to fight for my life. I'm standing here today because ultimately my friends help, and I don't know what else. Once I got my feet back onto the sand of the shore, I had an overwhelming feeling that from that moment forward, my life was bonus. It's a gift. The meditative moments were actually in my recovery, though. Thankfully, I had no broken bones or head trauma, but my body was all torn up. Each day of patchwork bandages, painful stretching, the stairs on the subway, so bad. Deep breathing, and also deep considering of the very now moment that had passed me, reattaching me to the very now of right now when I remember that moment. Sometimes I'm just on the subway. No headphones, no screen, little thought, just observation and accepting all that I see, racing through the dark underground tunnels. Do you remember when Jonathan told us all about raw dogging? I didn't even know about the trend when I drove the 11-hour drive to Indiana without any music, podcasts, or phone calls. 11 hours. You know, when you're completely by yourself for hours on end with little stimuli except your body mindlessly coaxing a speeding machine to stay in its lane, things can get pretty goofy. At least for me. I wasn't even trying to raw dog. I was actually frustrated trying to think of music that would fit my sour mood on that early foggy morning that I left. But I couldn't think of the right tone, and I just said, F it, I'm not listening to anything. After a while of nothing, I started embracing and cherishing nothing. And then I started filling the nothing with my nothing. Recently, I had an instant of looking deep into someone's eyes in a way that I've never, ever experienced before. It was notable actually because of the lack of emotion or thought I felt. It was a profound and thorough moment of just pure being. It was fleeting, of course, but I think that instant is staying with me in a meditative way, even right now. About 9 years ago, someone said something to me that shook the foundations of what I desired most in the world. Yeah, it was a breakup. I went into shock and remained an unfeeling zombie for several days. My mom reminded me of some simple breath patterns to help. And being a highly visual person, I began trying to make mental images to follow the breath pattern, and then decided to animate what my mind's eye saw. I ended up creating one of my favorite pieces of art. And aesthetic aside, I cherish it for how it helped my soul reawaken to desire. Another instant that is a frequent point of meditation for me is when my college professor offered to preview a big paper before it was graded to offer feedback. He told me that it was great, but that I should start the paper with what I had ended the paper with, essentially prompting me to build a whole new paper and line of argument from the concluding thought of what I wrote to turn in, like a couple days before it's due. He had a knack of asking the eternal, but why, question that pierced so many of my profound observations. Do not have God speak to us, or we will die. I'm realizing that my recollections thread together in a way. Death is present. Whether it's the negation of an idea, corporeal threat, stimuli reduction, or ego death. Ego death is often referred to as part of the cycle of contemplation, Jungian psychology, the hero's journey, etc., etc. And meditation is often considered a tool to confront, accept, and integrate this death as a necessary and good part of being. Some of you have probably talked about this in therapy. With the Israelite situation in the desert, going back to Exodus, they've just escaped bondage in Egypt, and I'm sure their fear of death was heightened. They just wanted Moses to do the thing for them. Thunder, lightning, and loud trumpets were scary and deathly. Perhaps also they were afraid of being seen, being naked, too concerned with survival to imagine what they too could access God directly, could access the deep parts of themselves directly. They wanted Moses to summarize it for them. Just give us a 10-point bullet point summary. Sound familiar? They just wanted Moses to compile the data, to imagine a new image, and to conjure a new action plan for them. Is meditation emptying the mind or filling the mind? I see life present alongside death in my recollections, life and death. I can understand that meditation does both in body and mind. Or maybe I should start saying body-mind. The inverse trees in our chest complete a remarkable exchange of elements from thin air, repeating a tidal cycle of in and out. The earth takes a giant breath of spring life and a giant breath out during the fall decay. It's often pointed out that the letters for the Hebrew name of God, YHWH, represent breathing sounds or aspirated consonants. It sounds like breathing. I think Jesus embodied this wisdom quite literally, and I think we can too. I think we're all meditating a lot more than we realize. And I hope that after today, we might consider how to move from our meditative moments into practices and disciplines that honor the cultural traditions that we draw from, that resist commodifying our practice, and that approach the practice with humility and simplicity. Still, though, I can hear Dr. Berg, my college professor, saying the words to me, but why? Why meditate? Meditation is often described as an inward motion of an individual, and I think it's plain to see the benefit of balance and clarity that it might bring. But actually, what's the outward result of meditation? How does my being my true self benefit my community? For me, it becomes startlingly clear when I think of this community of Forefront. How it's easily the most diverse and accepting community I've ever been a part of. We've come from different religious backgrounds, different ethnicities, cultures, seasons of life, gender expressions. I could go on. And we celebrate all of that. So many distinctions that most would say divide us, yet here there's a felt responsibility for each of us to bring our full selves to bear in this space, because we see how it allows and encourages those around us to also access their full selves. Many who walk in this door of the community have been made to fear their full selves, have come from communities full of repression. And it's only when you see others accessing their full selves that you can begin to heal, to feel safety to do the same. Next week, we are celebrating 2 of our community members who are sharing their full selves with us. Yes, yes, yes. May we continue to celebrate and cultivate fullness, each and every one of us, breathing in, breathing out, emptying and filling for each other. Thank you. Yeah.